Well, first of all, the President of the United States needs to go and tell the American people why we are going to take action that I am advocating. Second of all, this is now a regional conflict. This isn't just a civil, bunch of demonstrators being beaten up. This is a regional conflict. It's spilled over into Jordan is destabilized. Lebanon is about to erupt into sectarian violence. The jihadists are flowing in from all over the Middle East.
All right, there you go, folks. Welcome to the Steve Malzberg Show, the Friday edition. John McCain yesterday talking about why he supports action in Syria, as the president or the White House announced yesterday that the red line has been crossed. I immediately said that it's, I believe the White House is choosing this timing purposefully, and that it's a distraction to the ongoing scandals. Joining us now is our friend, former ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador John Bolton. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, my pleasure. Okay, so about 24 hours ago, we got word that all of a sudden the White House had its red line crossed in Syria, and we're going to have to take some action, either arming the rebels or a no-fly zone or both. Why now?
Well, I think the administration's credibility on a whole range of issues is pretty well shot. And why now, as opposed to next week? Very good question. It's why the president is off campaigning on gun control or one issue or another. I think to try and change the subject, get it back on immigration reform or something else. The fact is that the information that they've had here, they've had for some time. There have been additional verifications of it, but they could have announced this before. And even more interestingly, of course, despite the effort to make it seem like a major change of policy, we still don't know what the administration plans to do about it. It was announced not by the president. I think Senator McCain's making an important point there. The president's out in the tall grass on the Syria issue, just like he is on many other issues. It's announced by a White House staffer, and there are virtually no specifics in it at all. We don't know what weapons are going to be supplied to the Syrian opposition. We don't know when it's going to take place. We don't know a lot of things, and so it gives the impression that it's more political hoopla than anything else.
No, I agree. And there's a report today that the president is going to address this to the American public at some point. They're talking about a press conference when he's in Ireland, if I'm not mistaken, next week. Maybe he'll take a few questions there. But when I say why now, like you said, maybe they've gotten more independent verification of what they're claiming. But this president's so-called red line has been crossed now for months, first with the moving of weapons, with accusations of use of chemical weapons on both sides. The UN said it happened. France said it happened on the part of the rebels. I mean, so again, this seems very arbitrary, and a skeptic, Mr. Ambassador, might think that it was to take everybody's eyes off the scandal ball.
Yeah. Well, as you point out, he's going to Europe next week for a G8 meeting, and of course he's going to come into contact on Monday with Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. The Russians have already reacted today to the announcement by the White House yesterday. They're rejecting any claim that the Assad forces have used chemical weapons. So we're going to see the administration policy, which has rested for close to a month now on the hoopla surrounding Secretary of State Kerry's announcement that the U.S. and Russia were co-sponsoring what else but a peace conference on Syria. I mean, we are just as far apart from the Russians on this as we have been for the last 2.5 years, and I think that will be very clear in this meeting as well. So you've got, as again Senator McCain said correctly, this is a regional conflict, largely because of the influence of Iran and Russia supporting the Assad government.
Okay. When it comes to the rebels, again, and you and I have discussed this in the past, the question of who they are. There was a report in USA Today earlier this week that a rebel group and the leadership pledged allegiance to al-Qaeda. Have a story here in the Washington Post that Syrian rebels executed a 14-year-old boy for daring to mention the Prophet Muhammad's name in some kind of fashion that they didn't see fit. So who are we going to be supporting here?
Well, I think that's another part of the Obama administration's policy, and I think that's a major part of the difficulty in advocating any support for the opposition. People say, well, the Assad regime has carried out a lot of brutal human rights violations. Thousands of innocent civilians have been killed. That's certainly true. Unfortunately, not all of those human rights violations and civilian killings have been carried out by the Assad forces. The rebel groups have their share as well. And the risk that if the rebels take control, there will be a bloodbath against those who have supported Assad, the Christians, the Alawites, the Druze, is very, very real. And I think that risk has increased as the struggle has gone on. I don't think the United States did what it might have done 2.5 years ago to identify responsible leaders. So it's a terrible situation, but I don't think the United States intervenes because it says, well, this group has committed fewer human rights violations than the Assad regime, and therefore we'll back them. I think this is a case where the number of white hats involved is very, very small.
Okay, now one other report here on this, and this comes from the Washington Post today, that Turkish media is saying 73 Syrian military officers and their families have crossed the border seeking refuge. What is this indicative of, if anything?
Well, I think that that support for Assad continues to erode. You know, where the press is filled with stories in recent weeks that Assad's on a roll, that his forces have won a number of victories. That's true, but that doesn't mean this battle is over by any stretch of the imagination. There have been a lot of ups and downs here. I think a lot of people are surprised Assad hasn't already been overthrown. But just because for the past month he's had a string of military successes doesn't mean he's on the road to victory either. I think the most likely prospect, and obviously no one can know for sure, but the most likely prospect is that the conflict simply grinds on, and we're ignoring what I think the true root of the problem is, which is the regime in Tehran and Moscow. All
right, let's move on. We're talking to Ambassador John Bolton here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Iran having a vote. It's the end of Ahmadinejad, and they're voting for president. And the Ayatollah says, send a message to the United States, who claims that this is a sham of an election. Everybody come out and vote. What, if any, significance is there to this presidential election?
Well, I don't think that whoever wins is going to have any effect on changing Iran's policy on its nuclear weapons program. There may be a lot of debates internally about this aspect of Sharia law or that economic policy. That may be the case, but the fundamental concern we have of Iran's continued pursuit of nuclear weapons, its long-standing financial and military support of international terrorists, that's not going to change no matter who wins. This election is not an election in the American sense. Ultimately, the Ayatollahs will decide who they want in there, whether somebody wins today in a 50% plus one outcome, or the top two go on to a runoff in a week or 10 days.
Okay, one more for you, and that involves the, I don't think we've talked since the president made his, what I view as an in-your-face announcement that Susan Rice will be the new National Security Advisor, and Samantha Power nominated to succeed Susan Rice. What's your take on both of those moves?
Well, I think the Rice move to the National Security Advisor job was baked in the cake after her campaign to become Secretary of State fell apart because of the controversy over Benghazi. So I'm not at all surprised by that. I think the nomination of Samantha Power is really the in-your-face move. She's got a very radical view of the United States. You know, some years ago, I think it was in the New Republic, she said we need a mea culpa doctrine for the United States, basically saying we needed to apologize the way West Germany has apologized for the Holocaust during the Nazi era. She said unbelievable things about American policy in the Middle East, including why we should put in military forces into Israel and the West Bank and Gaza to prevent Israeli human rights violations. Now, she backed off of that after controversy erupted, but she's got a long record. She's written a lot. She's spoken in a lot of conferences, given a lot of speeches. I think Republicans on the Hill need to take a very careful look at that record.
Absolutely, and it's to me symptomatic of the Republicans on the Hill, even though he'll have no say in it. Congressman Chaffetz, when asked on the day of the appointment, I think he was on CNN, he said, he commented on Rice, but he said, as far as power, he said, I'm not familiar with her. And I just hope that the people who are in charge of the confirmation educate themselves. It's not hard to do these days, and find out what she has said and written in the past. And she is as left-wing radical a UN ambassador as we would have ever have had in that position.
Yeah, she's a perfect match for Barack Obama, and I think this is an indication of what he wants to do in a second term. He's freed from ever having to face the voters again, and this is what he's going to try and get away with. So I think it's up to the Republicans to decide whether they're going to let it happen easily or whether they're going to take a careful look at what she said over the years.
Mr. Ambassador, as always, we appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.